Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be talking about this respectable gentleman and more specifically about this quest. So 6.25 is up there with one of the, if not the most hated quests in history of Marvel Contest of Champions. Typically when a new person jumps on my stream and when they ask for help with specific quests, then there are two quests that are always mentioned. Either it is 5.24 as a whole, because that is the first time people are facing like a really tricky nodes where you need to learn how to play around them, and 6.25. Now, why specifically 6.25? Well, one of the things that makes 6.25 very, very difficult and annoying is the global node. It's do not go gentle node, and I have made a video already focusing about how to work around that node, and vast majority of the information is still up to date. Obviously we have some new interesting counters, like Mole Man can always get that on-demand intercept, which can be very helpful, and Dr. Doom is very good at throwing heavy attacks, for example. But at large, that video is still perfectly up to date and very, very viable. However, I do feel that since this quest is a big problem, I do want to make an additional video more specifically talking about problem fights on each individual lane. Now, why it is so important, let's just take a look here. We can see that there are a ton of paths and a ton of problem lanes. And this video obviously will take a while. I will not spend too much time on each fight, and from this list I might not visit every single one of them. But if you want to take a quick screenshot, that is perfectly fine. I kind of listed the main things that you need to be worried about in every single lane as you go along. So maybe if you do not want to watch this video and repeat and try and find wherever I talk about specific lane that you are clearing right now, could be potentially a good idea to take a screenshot of this text and then refer to it after you have watched the video. But all that being said, there are 9 paths, path A till F, and then we have 6-star gate, we have tech gate, we have mutant gate, and then we have cosmic gate. It's actually 10 paths, I think. Yes, 10 paths. But either way, a ton of paths, a ton of fights, and what makes it all difficult obviously is the combination of very crazy nodes and a lot of different specific requirements. We can see that some of these lanes, like in Tech Gate, we have to deal with Spite, with Power Gain, with Unblockable, with Debuff Immunity. We have Storm on No Retreat, we have Prove Yourself, Cable with Buffet and Bane, and then there are lanes that require you to have Bleed Immune Champions, Poison Immune Champions, Incinerate Immune Champions, Shock Immune Champions. And I think one of the trickier things in this quest is understanding exactly how you want to build a team, especially if you are limited in the later path on like 4 champions from a single class, and that is kind of like the 3rd level of extra added difficulty. Right, there is no easy kind of like cheat answer for this. Obviously Quake is great for a lot of fights, so is Ghost and a few other champions, but ultimately each path needs to be taken separately and dissected. And before you head into each new path, it's important to identify the base requirements and the main risks that you will be facing off against. Therefore, we will jump in the game and I will go over most difficult fights and suggest this map in particular are quite awful, especially with the global that you always have to work with, and I cannot address all of these fights. Neither I can possibly mention every single possible counter, but I will do my best. Now, when it comes to Loki and MF Frost, I don't think it requires anything overly specific or special, but the first fight that is quite annoying, obviously, is the Mephisto, where you have to deal with Incinerate, and he has like extra regen added to him. Therefore, you definitely do want to pack an Incinerate immune champion or somebody that does deal with Incinerate damage extremely well. Like a perfect counter here from top of my head obviously would be Void, because you can slow play it, you can use Void to work around Do Not Go Gentle quite well, and he's Incinerate immune and he can handle Mephisto's power gain. But there are several viable options, and basically anything that is Incinerate immune and would work in any Mephisto matchup can be used there because there are no extra restrictions. Our next fight, here we have regeneration, and poison on an Electro. Now, this fight, in theory, doesn't even have a perfect counter. There is no poison immune champion that can bypass Electro's abilities and shut down regen perfectly. Now, the best option that I could find going through all the list of the champions that are currently available in the game would probably be Hyperion, because Hyperion is poison immune, so you do not have to worry about that, and his level 1 does not make any contact with the opponent, and you can place a bunch of incinerates on the opponent with the Spare Mastery, shutting down his regen. But again, his heavy attack is 5 hits, his special attack is multiple hits as well, so you're going to have quite hard time dealing with Do Not Go Gentle. Another viable option is Captain Marvel movie version, because if she is awakened, she gains her Indestructible, which you can utilize to completely nuke down this Electro in a very, very short amount of time. If you play it right, if you apply big boosts, and you can mitigate Electro's healing using Captain Marvel's armor breaks, and once again, the Spare Mastery. Now, you can try out Namor and very aggressive playstyle, because he inflicts plenty of bleeds, synergize Despair, reflects Electro's damage, and the poison damage. It will not be an easy fight, but it is doable. Similar as you can use Nick Fury, you can out-damage and shut down Electro's healing with the bleeds and the debuffs, and you can just take the damage on the chin, and with Disorient, you will not always necessarily be taking the damage there, but there is still Do Not Go Gentle that you ideally want to work around. Point of the matter is, this is likely a fight that you're going to have to use some resources or perhaps a revive for. There aren't many ideal counters. And yeah, it's just something that you need to find what is best option that is available to you. For instance, maybe you find Immortal Abomination can do the job for you because of the physical resistance. You don't take as much damage, I believe. And because of the consistent heal, you can just kind of slow play the fight and let poisons do the most of the damage. That is also a perfectly viable option. Similarly to, let's say, Sentinel. But ultimately, there is no perfect counter for this fight, which absolutely sucks. And that is part of the reason why this quest in itself is so hard. Then we have Thing. And Thing, for a thing in a serious quest, is fairly straightforward. You have Aspect of Nightmares, which you just need to make sure you are above 50% health when you enter the fight. And other than that, it's just bring in anyone who typically does well against Thing, either makes him bleed a lot, therefore shrugs off the rock stacks, bypasses the ability accuracy by preventing him from gaining rock stacks, or simply deals with Unstoppable via slow or in some other decently good way. But yeah, that is about it for this lane. The rest of the fights are perfectly manageable, do not require anything too specific outside of this Proxima, which also demands you to be shock immune. Really, these fights are fairly specific. So again, you need to bring in somebody that's Incinerate immune, you need to bring in somebody that's shock immune, you need to bring in somebody that's specifically for that Electro, and ideally somebody to deal with Thing. It's very hard building teams in here, and that is what makes it hard. Wasp is perfectly fine, and Joe Fixit isn't the worst either. So we can move on to the next path. B, and path B is already quite a bit considerably nastier beast. If you thought that path A is annoying, then path B definitely is even more so annoying. We can start off with Magneto with Chaos and Aggression Regeneration, and this fight ideally gets cheesed by somebody who can reverse regen, like Captain America Infinity War or Void or Human Torch. All of those are perfectly viable options. There is Chaos, but occasionally that Chaos can work out in your favor, but basically a viable strategy as well, but it is making life harder for yourself. Now, this fight in particular is one of the most annoying ones in the entire quest as well, because you have to deal with Micro Reflect, and Ant-Man does glance like a crazy person. There is also Energize 200%, which means he gains 200% power increase, and the entire fight is very, very, very tricky to manage. Now, on top of my head, outside of Quake, probably one of the better options here that I can think of would be Blade, because Blade can just parry heavy, deal damage, you don't have to deal with the glancing, and also little known secret, Blade's level 1 never gets glanced, and all of those bleeds always trigger. Outside of using blade, you are looking at the very least at something that doesn't take passive damage back or has a very significant ability accuracy reduction. But again, the ability accuracy reduction might not necessarily always work due to Ant-Man's glancing. So you have a very kind of specific list of champions here that you are looking at. Archangel is a viable option. Omega Red, I believe, is also a relatively decent option, but these fights, none of them will be easy to do because you have to deal with 200% power gain. Therefore, Quake here is by far the best option. Everything else is going to result in quite painful fight, even if you use like Blade, even if you use Archangel, even if you use Omega Red, or any other champion that doesn't take passive damage back. It's just quite plainly put, very, very crappy designed fight, which we have a lot of in this quest. Now, next up, we have Korg, and Korg is relatively straightforward for a Korg. Obviously, any big Korg is always annoying, especially with Force of Will and Adaptive, making him tankier. However, at the same time, if you have fought Korgs anywhere else, then you're going to be perfectly fine. There is a plethora of champions that bypass Korg's abilities extremely well. Even the newly added Strifes, or even the newly added Professor X is an excellent Korg counter. Then we have some of the older champions that got buffed. For instance, Gambit doesn't take any damage back. Omega Red would work fantastic. Quake's always there as well. Will be maybe slightly longer fight, but I don't think that anybody has a problem finding answer to a Korg. Now, the bigger problem here would be Breakthrough, Caustic Temper, and Regeneration node. And I have seen a lot of people despair kind of like with this node and get very afraid of it and can't find proper counter for it and just kind of like get stuck on it. Now, the key to beating this Venom in particular lies in the Breakthrough. And because of that, the longer the fight goes, the more damage you are able to deal. Therefore, you can completely ignore the Regeneration node, because any champion at all in long enough fight will be able to outdamage this regen. You can take in the biggest noodle of noodles, biggest king noodle that you can find, and so long as you can bypass Caustic Temper, any champion is capable of finishing this fight. Now, when it comes to dealing with Caustic Temper specifically, most likely you are looking at the Cosmic class, at champions like Hyperion, at Medusa, at Captain Marvel movie version, or whoever is able to gain a Fury buff and is poison immune, like Hulk, I believe, like Labyrinth of Legends Ultron. All of those are perfectly viable options. Only thing you need to worry about here is having the Fury buff and being poison immune. Other two nodes kind of cancel each other out in long term, but this fight, remember, will be very daunting at first because of that huge regen, and you're going to feel like you're not getting anywhere. The key to this fight is just kind of like hang in there, persevere, and carry on. You're going to get 100 hits in, you're going to have crazy damage, you're going to get 150 hits in, he's going to go down even if you're not countering the regen directly. So it is quite honestly a lot easier fight than it initially seems. Then Rogue with Spite and Bane, but again, it's annoying, but it's hardly that problematic. We have Tranquility, Bleed, and Brute Force Hulk, so you once again need to have Bleed immune. They're really shooting for all the immunities in this quest. Enhanced Special 2 Spiked Armor and Vigor lane, and again, you have to deal with regen and Spiked Armor. However, Spiked Armor has a lot of very similar mechanics to those of Korg. So quite often, if you can counter Korg, you can counter Spiked Armor, or at the very least against Quake, you can also use Mystic Champion to nullify Spiked Armor nodes and feed your Mystic Dispersion. So even like Doom here would be quite a decent option, as he doesn't crit a lot. He can stagger and or nullify the Vigor and Spiked Armor buffs, and therefore he'd feed his power bar quite effectively. Just another way how to approach Spiked Armor, or Quake the Quake. I should stop mentioning Quake in this video because people are going to get annoyed. And then lastly, we have Backup Recovery, Stun Immune, Masochism, Scarlet Witch. And the nodes themselves aren't too bad, but keep in mind that on top of the bleed immunity that was required earlier, when you're going up against Scarlet Witch, unless you are directly countering her ability accuracy, or avoiding critical hits, period, with a champion like Guardian or Guillotine 2099, you are looking for a poison immune champion with high damage output that can basically rival Masochism healing and does not necessarily rely on frequent debuffs. But that is it for this lane, and let's jump on Path C. Now, Path C is arguably something I would call the quote-unquote easy path, maybe alongside Path A, because there aren't that many fights to counter, therefore relatively free roster selection is available. First off, you have to deal with Hela, and that is fair enough. Second fight is Moon Knight, who is likely going to be evading like crazy, but that is fair. And you can use many different champions. And next up, we have the first real annoying fight on this lane, which is Gwenpool with Surging Vengeance and 200% Energize, and some other crappy nodes nobody cares about. So, basically, Surging Vengeance is the same node that 6.36 Captain America Infinity War has, where opponent is going to throw special attacks in a specific your way through this fight with the Reviver 2. However, ideally you do want to bring in somebody that has either power control or taunt mechanic, or yes, you guessed it, Quake, or at the very least can tank the level 3, therefore either Iceman or Ghost plus Hood synergy. But you should plan for this fight, and you should be very ready to deal with everything it throws at you, because it's not wise to brute force your way through these fights. Now, next up, Kinetic Transference, Masochism, Voodoo. It's nothing too crazy. I'm sure you are capable of dealing with that. Then we have Pessimism, Optimism, Godslayer, Enhanced Crit Gamora. Nothing special. Spry, Stun, yep, whatever. That's still perfectly fine. Nothing crazy. Here on Karnak, we have Breakthrough Note, and it's actually very easy fight, but the only side note here is that if you are running Suicide Masteries, then this node has heal block active, so you need to keep that in mind. So if you are running Suicide Masteries, you need to bring in an immune champion or somebody who would survive. And Colossus is once again fairly straightforward. Stun immune, 100% increased power gain, but it's not the worst fight in the world. Therefore, Path C really isn't all that bad compared to other ones, and is probably the first lane that you did already, therefore you're fast forwarding to the next path. Now we are looking at Path D, the one that starts with Drax. Now, Drax is already a first fight on the lane, and it is a fight that does need a specific countering, because it is all or nothing and 100% increased power gain and limber. Therefore, just like in Gwenpool fight, where we see level 3 mechanic and the power gain, you do need somebody that has either taunt mechanic, either power control, or ability to tank level 3s. All the same counters apply. Dr. Dooms, your Quakes, your Magics, your whatever else you want to use, your Icemans or Ghosts plus Hood synergy. Next up, we have Ultron with Aspect of War, which ideally you would want to use like a slow champion to deal with the Unstoppable after every time they are throwing special attack. But at the same time, remember, the Aspect of War is not just opponents going unstoppable, it's them reducing your block proficiency and eventually going unblockable. Ideal counter here, I think, could potentially be Red Guardian, because Red Guardian also has the ability to block unblockable hits as well as to prevent unstoppable. Using Ghost is also a perfectly viable strategy, because just like Ghost's phase intercepts counts for Do Not Go Gentle, you also count it for Aspect of War, and you can quite reliably get rid of that unstoppable by landing precise intercepts. And another very great counter here alongside Ghost is obviously Quake, but I really should stop saying it, because that's going to be the first comment I hear in the comment section. Stop saying Quake all the time. It's not my fault she's so good for this, okay? Whatever, let's move on. Aggression, precision, whatever. This Venom Duck is Chow Chow food, nothing important. Ronan, Stupefy Biohazard, so you are required to bring in a Bleed Immune champion at the very least, but if you are using Ghost as suggested earlier for the first couple of fights, wonderful. So this is pretty much the Ghost fight path thus far, I believe. Aggression, Fury, Aggressive, Stun Immune, Beast, who cares? That's a sissy food. Another fight that requires bleed immunity, ideally, or at the very least energy attack, so you don't get bled. But it's Morningstar, not overly the craziest thing. And here we have the crazy doctor, the crazy Dr. Cuckoo von Cuckoo House himself. Doctor Strange, 200% power gain, aggression, fury. That combination is just brutal, stupid, masochistic, and I can't believe Kabam hates their own players to ever do this, let alone put this Doctor Strange on increased power gain in pretty much every variant for a while, and whatever. I'm not going to comment on it. You want Dr. Octopus here. It's quite simple. Doc Ock, a brilliant option. You can also try using Dr. Doom. You can try using Ghost and phasing the level 3s with Hood synergy. That's perfectly viable option, but this fight, if you are unprepared, will make you throw your phone against the wall, and therefore definitely do not underestimate the power of this Doctor Strange in particular, because he's jacked, he's stacked, and he means business. Remember, Doc Ock, Ghost plus Hood, Dr. Doom probably works. I haven't tried him there myself, but those would be kind of like the most typical solutions. Right, and the final fight is Vulture, who's a sissy compared to most of the other fights on this lane, because he's just stun immune, has vigor, and special 3 bias. But if you were dealing with Drax, who is all or nothing in the very first fight, guess what? Vulture is going to be an easier time. Therefore, just keep in mind that he has the special 3 bias, that you need to use somebody with power control or tank his specials, and you're going to be good to go. On path E. Right, we're about halfway through. Good for us. This quest is a real bullshittery factory. Anyways, first on Diablo. Against Diablo, nobody respects Diablo, but sometimes you should, because when you combine his resistor thing with kinetic brewing and toxic rage, he becomes extremely beefy and randomly goes unstoppable. Therefore, ideally, you want somebody that counters unstoppable perfectly and reliably, and either has access to slow or nullification or something of the sort. Do not underestimate this Diablo. You can't just walk through him like he's nothing with any average champion. He'll catch you. The good thing is he's the first fight, so you can kind of just redo it. Next up, Venom Pool, and Venom Pool is obviously a very easy fight. Just make sure you have an Incinerate immune. You're typically trying to avoid blocking / parrying against Black Panther due to that stun reflection. So the main thing here to deal with is the 200% power gain, and again, you can approach this with several different strategies. You can either Ghost phase tank special 3s or use any other champion that's capable of tanking special 3s. Use Quake, do not give him any power to begin with, or ideally have some power control mechanic. Now, when it comes to Black Panther Civil War, if you are fairly confident with your playing ability, then you can also actually use this 200% power gain to your advantage to push him consistently to 2 bars of power, because level 2 is quite significantly less likely to catch you in a bad dashback or something. So that is also a viable strategy, and you can kind of use any champion here. Just be aware of the power gain of the sharpened claws and everything else. Now we have Rocket, who is Aspect of Chaos, and I like to look at Aspect of Chaos as free health potions, so be thankful for that one. Now, Energize, 2 stun immunity, Reborn, Luke Cage. Again, 200% power gain, quite popular in this quest apparently, but you can kind of use pretty much any champion. Just bet down the level 2s, make sure he doesn't get to level 3, or again, tank the special 3s, or don't give him power any via Quake, but yeah, nothing too demanding there. Now we have No Retreat, everybody's favorite node once again, making an appearance, not for the last time in this quest, I believe, Sentry, but there we go. My best piece of advice quite often with No Retreat is just to ignore it. If you're using high damage output champion, maybe do not necessarily try to trigger it, but most of the time when you're going up against No Retreat, you end up dying not because of the No Retreat damage, but because you're messing up trying not to trigger it. Quite often, if the fight isn't going your way and if he's not throwing special attacks when he's meant to throw the special attacks, just eat that no retreat damage. You can't re-trigger it whilst it's degening you, So it's going to give you a good window of opportunity to recalibrate yourself and get back into the fight. Yes, you will have taken some damage, but it's not like it's immediately killing you off. So that is one thing with no retreat. Quite often, most of the time, people die because of it, because they're trying not to trigger it rather than the damage they're taking there. And then obviously we have Mesmerize, Spiked Armor, Guillotine. Because life's not annoying enough, Mesmerize is something that you definitely do want to counter. Therefore, you have to bring in a full-on evade counter that normally doesn't get hurt by Spiked Armor too much. So to deal with Mesmerize, there are several valid options. Obviously, if you prevent opponent from evading in the first place, why True Strike, True Accuracy, Slow Debuff, or Ability Accuracy Reduction, that is perfectly fine. However, you can always parry heavy. If the heavy attack is a quick animation, that bypasses Mesmerize as well. Therefore, any champion that executes a heavy attack before the parry stun is over is perfectly viable to work around Mesmerize in this fight. And then you can focus on the Spiked Armor. Spiked Armor, once again, can be bypassed with Ability Accuracy Reduction champions or champions that do not take any passive damage back, like Omega Red, like Gambit, and a whole bunch of others. Which option is the one that you want to use? It's up to you. However, definitely be aware of this fight. And then Cyclops, most effective champion, is probably the least effective in this specific scenario. He just has enhanced special attacks, so nothing special. It's going to be like walk in a park compared with everything else that you have to deal on this. Finally, we are on path F, which is the last one of the quote-unquote non-gated path. So we are making progress here, guys. Bear with me. First fight, King Groot, absolutely nothing special. King Groot's tanky, he's annoying, he has limber, but you can deal with him with pretty much any champion that can outdamage his regen. However, next up we have Captain Marvel with Short Burst, Lockdown, and Shock. Short Burst Lockdown matters if you are running Suicide Masteries because you are starting the fight with Heal Block and Armor Break. However, it is important to know that if your Ghost is awakened, your first phase triggers. Yes, you do have the Armor Break, but that does counter the Shock if the Ghost is awakened. So Ghost is an option to kind of like substitute for a Shock immune champion in this fight. Other than that, you can obviously bring in your Dr. Doom. You can bring in who Ghost would be a fantastic option here to bypass their weight as well. Or you can have Bleed Immune champion. The problem with these quests is because you often need to find a champion that counters several fights on this lane. That's why try as much to bring up some of the champions as often as possible. Hood, unblockable finale, nothing special, we can move on. Then we have 200% power gain. War Machine, again, ideally you do want somebody that controls power quite well. Perfect if it is from Mystic class, because War Machine does feed Mystic champions extremely well with Mystic Dispersion and potentially lets you finish the fight quicker. Now we have Aggression, Regeneration, Immunity, Rhino, but there is absolutely nothing that prevents you from having a very high fast-paced fight here. Therefore, in most of the cases, you can kind of ignore the Aggression Regeneration if you are able of dishing out decent amount of damage and just try and play as aggressive as you can. This is not a fight where Aggression Regen needs to be like very specifically countered. Now, Abomination in itself obviously demands a Poison Immune champion, so for this lane you need Shock Immunity, Bleed Immunity, and also Poison Immunity, with Bane on top of it, just to make the fight even ever slightly so more stressful. But it is what it is. If you have the immunities, you should be quite good. And Sentinel. Now, Sentinel doesn't seem like too scary initially, but you should be afraid. There is Resistor and there is Aggression Regeneration. If you combine Aggression Regeneration, Resistor plus Sentinel's natural tankiness, this fight can turn into a very, very horrible experience. Therefore, you want something that either counters Aggression Regeneration flat out or inflicts a lot of debuffs, damage over time effects, and kind of like bypasses at least some of this tankiness factor. Or you can use a Mystic champion that just kind of nullifies all the Resistor charges and you try and cheese through it. But this fight is scarier than it looks. Respect it and bring in an appropriate counter. But now we can finally jump to the gated paths. Oh boy. So we're going to be starting off with the 6-star gate. Because 6-star gate is possibly the easiest one, because I think as the time has moved past, 6-star requirements are becoming like more and more the norm. And if anything, the fact that you have to bring in 6 stars is better than you have to bring in specific class 5 stars, because many people are stopping to rank up the 5 stars. Anyways, when it comes to path itself, it's not really quite the worst. Every single fight here has cornered, so ideally you want to avoid damage or time effects, because it is 300% cornered and it is going to be annoying. But Corvus doesn't have anything too special. Then we have Groot here with the aspect of evolution, which is annoying. Definitely annoying, but if you bring in like a Mystic 6 star that can benefit from Groot's buffs, you shouldn't have too bad of a time. The annoying fight here would be Medusa, because she does have unblockable finale, you have a special one, and obviously there's still the cornered and do not go gentle. So you definitely do want to have like a quite good either counter to auto block or a Mystic champion that works with the effects of special lock 1 over here, because that is something to keep in mind. So yeah, make sure that you have some sort of nullification abilities on your level 1 or on your base kit that does not necessarily require you to shoot past the bar of power. And this one is potentially the most annoying fight here. Now, I think Gladiator Hulk, yes, he's somewhat annoying, but he's not like that bad to fight. Well, if you combine Do Not Go Gentle, where you either need to land a ton of heavy attacks or intercepting this guy is very hard, with Corner, that automatically discounts a ton of champions that you could potentially use against him. And then keep in mind that smash attacks have a 50% chance to be unblockable, and Hulk's chance to smash on all attacks increases by 400% if Face Me is active for whatever reason. So basically, he randomly will go unblockable and unstoppable when he goes to smash. So it's a very, very tricky fight. Obviously, you can kind of like work around smash if you are using a slow effect, because then smash takes no effect on its own, but the unblockability still would be there. So this fight is kind of like one of those things where you need to be very much on your game, bring in a decent counter. It doesn't have to have like a very specific counter, but you just need to be extremely aware of everything that's happening, and do not ever try to parry Gladiator Hulk's smash attack, because it has 50-50 chance of being unblockable. So you need to slow play it, and you need to be very, very careful. Now we have Gambit, nothing too special there. Cornered, Force of Will, Energy Resistance, Special 3 Bias, so there we go. Ideally have Power Control, ideally with the same champion that you use to deal with the magic perhaps, but yes, that is that. Now we have Bishop, just avoid energy attacks and you should be fine, nothing special there. But this magic is crazy. This magic is cray-cray. So let's start with the fact that she does have the Do Not Go Gentle thing active on her as well. She's stun immune and she has Bubble Shield. That means that blocking attacks can be useful. It's going to deal more damage and she's going to be going unblockable periodically. Cornered, make sure you can't use no damage or time effects, and we'll make sure that, for instance, Omega Red is much harder to use if you ever drop a heavy attack on her. 100% increased power gain will make sure she reaches her bars of power quicker, and then you have Brute Force on top of it. Now, I know some of you will want to slap me for this, but Quake's not the greatest option because of Brute Force. Ha! Got him! Right, anyways. If you're looking for good options, then the main thing here is to shut off her Limbo quite cleanly without relying on damage or time effects. Therefore, from top of the head, some of the champions that would be fantastic here could be even that Omega Red, just avoid the heavy attack, use tentacle hits to push her past the bar of power. Gambit can work, Falcon's lock on would be fantastic here. Even OG Black Widow could deal a very, very decently with this champion, as she doesn't inflict any damage or time effects and just shuts down the abilities. But yeah, there are definitely counters. It's just going to be very, very annoying fight. You can also try to ghost this fight, obviously, if you have Hood Synergy with you, and just try to phase away the Limbo damage, but it is quite annoying. Another alternative option is to use Blade and parry style a lot, and then just hit her ever so often to turn off the Brute Force, but that is a very, very tricky fight. So yeah, this magic is definitely quite annoying. Plan for her well, and moving on. Heimdall. Now, Heimdall's not too bad. He's corner, aggression, precision, perforate, hurt, locker, whatever. It's fairly straightforward fight, so nothing too much to worry about. However, the next gated path will be much, much more fun. So next up, we are moving to Cosmic Gate. Now, Cosmic Gate in Act 6, whenever you had a gated path, meant that you will always be fighting with a class advantage. However, it sounds very nice, but really, when you look over the node combinations and how limited pool of champions you have available, they are always extremely hard. The first fight, Ghost, is nothing too bad. They're just Plagued Mind, Stun, Immunity, but it's just Ghost. Nobody cares. Then we have Counter Tactics, Immune, Star-Lord. Again, it's Star-Lord. Counter Tactics can be scary, but it's not the worst. But then we have this Bleed, Stark Enhanced Spider-Man with Soft Guard. So basically, this is the first fight where you need an immunity here. You need to have a Bleed Immune champion, but if you have that, it's not the worst fight. Problems start, I believe, here. So first of all, we have this Darkhawk with a Raptor upgrades, Force of Will, and Special Luck 1. Now, why Raptor upgrades is very important. It means that he's going to start the fight unblockable on his light and medium attacks. His special attacks can be blocked. That means you have to be able to intercept. And Force of Will means his ability accuracy cannot be reduced. And since this happens at the very start of the fight, I believe that I don't think Magneto would even counter here if you would bring him in as your one non-cosmic champion that is allowed. So it's definitely a very, very tricky fight here, especially with that Special Lock 1. Now, for a cosmic champion, obviously you can't use Vision Arcus here because of Special Lock 1. I think even though he might be able to bypass it, but Medusa is still a perfectly viable option here. And it's not so much that you would shut down any of his abilities, because you will not, but it's much more about the fact that he can't gain any power. Or other than that, you can try and just brute force this fight with like a very stacked Corvus, for example, possibly Cosmic Ghost Rider, and just try and brute force. But again, Special Lock 1 is always going to be there hindering you. So it is a very, very hard fight indeed, and it's going to be very frustrating to deal with it unblockable start of the fight. Next up, we have Green Goblin and Burden of Might and Cornered and Counter Strike. And Counter Strike in this fight actually is kind of like more important than you'd think, because Green Goblin often is quite stingy with his special attacks. And when that happens, you end up dexing a lot. So it means that this Green Goblin is likely going to go unblockable fairly frequently. But it's Green Goblin. It's annoying, but you can deal with it. And it's not the kind of like the most annoying fight. It's just not overly great. How Incinerate and Crouching Stun, Counter Tactics, 200% power gain on Nebula. Now this is a stupid fight. I again don't understand what anyone was thinking making a fight like this. 200% power gain, Counter Tactics, so she's going to be hitting and sailing hard, and Crouching Stun, and you need to be Incinerate immune. And truth of the matter is, there is just no great counter here. There is nothing that would work perfect. My suggested method of dealing with this fight would probably still go down to Medusa. Now, you see, when they say the Incinerate 60, it deals 100% damage in 60 seconds. However, if you have Willpower active, you'll still have some HP left, because for those 60 seconds, you will end up healing percentages of your health. And if you go in with a magic that's 100% healthy, you are able to basically survive this Incinerate duration. And then if you lock her down with an Armor Shatter, she stops gaining power, so that answers to Energize, and Crouching Stun would also be shut off. I think that is ultimately the best answer here that lies within Cosmic class. But overall, there is just no great option here again. They designed these fights that just don't have good answers. Even to this day, they don't have great answers. There is not a single cosmic champion, I believe, that you could bring in that sorts out every problem here. So this is most likely, for most people, one of those wallet man, unit brute force kind of things where you just go in, deal as much damage as you can, cut your losses, bring in your team, revive afterwards, or try the magic thing. Right, now we have Red Skull. And again, by the way, if I am missing something, be sure to leave it in the comment section. I'm sure there will be people who will appreciate that. Next up, we have Red Skull with Buffet and Stun Immunity and Fury, but it's Red Skull. So armor break the crap out of the guy and use something that either can outdamage the Buffet or doesn't trigger it often, or puts a heal block on the opponent. But it's not the trickiest fight. Next up, this fight. We have very heavy regen with a power reserve on Iron Man Infinity War. And that regen is very, very potent. So there are several ways how to deal with this guy. But I think ultimately the best way to deal with this guy still would probably be Void. And I know Void isn't a Cosmic Champion, but Void is quite likely one of the best options for the final boss, and you have one spot available. So for this path, it's almost certain that you ideally want to bring in Void to counter the boss and this fight, to be able to reverse the regen. Because other than that, I can look at Cosmic Champions and nothing quite exactly comes to mind as a perfect counter here, because of how it all works. Because of he's technically bleed immune. Hyperion could be an answer here. Hyperion could be a decent answer as well. The Cosmic Champion, he can spam level 1, so he can incinerate him a ton. And if you keep a lot of incinerates on, then he's not going to be regenerating too much, but it's not going to be a very easy time. You can try out Cosmic Ghost Rider, and you can just try out and out damage it and kind of like blitz through the fight, or maybe very, very jacked up Corvus. But I think the smartest option here, especially if you're not running like Suicide Masteries, you're not max boosting, you don't have like jacked up champions, is try and work around with that regen using Void before using Void for the final boss. And yeah, so we can move on to the next. Final 2 lanes left. We can do this, guys. We can do this. So the tech champions, it requires 4 5-star tech champions. First fight's Havoc with improved power gain. So ideally, if you do have some power control abilities, you can be doing well. And obviously, you do want that armor buff, which is fairly frequent and common for tech champions. So that shouldn't be the biggest problem here. Next up, we need to take a look at Archangel, and that is a very straightforward fight. Special attacks are unblockable, but that's about it. You can do it with anyone. Now we have Mr. Sinister with Spite active and Limber. So keep in mind, if the first fight needed to have an armor up, and second fight you ideally would not have an armor up. However, even with an armor up, champion like Warlock obviously can deal with Mr. Sinister, and you're going to be just about fine. There's Omega Red, absolutely nothing special there. And then we have Sabretooth, that unfortunately is quite annoying, and you should kind of apply the same idea here that I talked previously about Lady Hulk. Every time he dashes in at you, he has a 20% chance to be unblockable. So you should avoid that at all. You should avoid parrying this guy, because every 5th attack he throws at you will be unblockable. But other than that, I don't know, bring in Warlock, intercept a bunch, you're going to be good. That's what the node wants you to do anyways. And here the fun starts. We have Domino with Hurt Locker, Enhanced Specials, and full immunity. And this Domino does deal quite a lot of crit fail damage as well, so ideally you do want to kind of like bypass that. Mysterio can make that happen, but other than that, you will end up taking quite a lot of damage. Now, obviously, luckily, tech champions naturally have quite high advantage here, and if you have Ghost and Warlock, probably going to be fine. Just keep in mind she's immune, so she's going to be quite hard to deal with, and Hurt Locker is another thing that you will have to contend with, and it's Domino. But it's not a fight that will make you stuck. There's no innate regen, for instance, involved. Now, Storm. Now, this fight is another, so this is the other and counter that we have with no retreat, and the same notes apply here. If you are ever struggling and the fight isn't going quite your way, you're likely gonna die in this fight because you mess up and you get hit in the face, not from no retreat damage. So sacrifice a bit of your health and trigger it. And then you can safely at least refocus the fight and beat the storm. That is it. That's the big advice here, because you have prove yourself special to bias and stun immunity. So she's not going to be the hardest nor the easiest fight, but if you're gonna start messing up because of no retreat, you're gonna have to do 3 full combos in order to be able to start doing damage. So much better idea for this fight, especially because of prove yourself, is just, if it comes to it, ignore no retreat, because once you trigger it, as long as it is dealing damage to you, you can't re-trigger it. So just take that damage on the chin and make sure you do not lose your combo. And then we again have Buffet, Power Struggle, Bane, Cable, which is a very wonderful fight. Ideally, you do want to work around Buffet using either champions that can absolutely ignore it or heal block it, but then again there is Power Struggle and a whole bunch of other stuff. You can very easily use champions that inflict heal block, because tech class is quite filled with that, and that is what you're going to end up using. But just keep in mind everything else that is happening, including Bane. So I'd still ultimately say that probably the best option for this fight would be somebody that benefits from the buffet, like Void, for example, if you are bringing in Void for the boss. Or if not, then Warlock, Mysterio, perhaps Sentinel should be able to deal with this fight kind of like sufficiently well. But it is a tricky one, it is an annoying one. And that will leave us with the final, very final path. We're almost done, I promise, guys. So the final path is Mutants. It's a path that is demanding you to bring in 4 5-star mutant champions. And it's very annoying, I'll be honest. This path is also quite annoying. Now we have Aspect of Evolution, and Aspect of Evolution makes every fight more annoying. Means the longer the fight goes, the less damage you do, basically. Whenever the defender fills a bar of power, they raise their attack, armor, critical rating, critical resistance, block penetration, combat power rate, and ability accuracy attributes by 5%. So if you do not finish these fights out quickly, you're never going to crit, and opponents are going to get a crap ton of power, and that is a node that's present in every single fight on this lane, I believe, on top of the Do Not Go Gentle Global. Now, Aegon in itself does have some of the annoying nodes that we saw in the EQ when he was released, where he gains his combo meter persistently, so the key is always to finish him off quickly. But thanks to those buffs that he gets, if you do have a Mystic Champion brought on this lane to help you deal with the final boss, because some of the better options could potentially be Mystic Champions, like Simp Supreme or Dr. Doom, for instance, you can totally cheese this lane, cheese this fight as well. Now we have Aspect of Evolution, Stun Immunity, Special 3 Bias, and Aggression Regeneration. And again, my ideal suggestion for this lane is quite simply using Dr. Doom, because you have power control and you can kind of like just keep on aggressive. You never quite have to worry about baiting out special attack, especially knowing that he's not going to really throw any other special attack. So it's high of level 3, you can stay really aggressive, spam your level 1s, and kind of like keep him in between 2 and 1 bar of power. Alternatively, obviously, you just want to finish this fight out as quickly as possible. And an alternate option could potentially be Archangel, because Archangel involves heal block. I know he's stun immune, but you can still make it happen, and Archangel would be a quite great option here. Next up, Taskmaster, and all of those specific Taskmaster nodes are complemented with close encounters. So it means you have to remain close to the guy, and you cannot kind of like slow play it and play from a distance, because you otherwise will be degening very quickly. But his nodes basically give him a ton of evade. Whenever Exploit Weakness is the same attack that you're trying to launch, he has a fairly decent chance to evade your attack, I believe 30%, so it will happen a lot. So ideally you do want some sort of evade counter that does not rely on putting debuffs on Taskmaster, because obviously Taskmaster goes debuff immune quite quickly. Quite frankly, it is quite an annoying fight, especially if you're looking for a reliable await counter that doesn't rely on debuffs in Mutant class. You're going to find that there aren't too many, and you're going to have to be very, very, very careful with this fight. However, ultimately, you can kind of push through with any high damage output Mutant champion. Night Thrasher, absolutely nothing special worth talking about there. Just learn to await his level 1 and you are good. Now we have Aspect of Evolution, Pilfer Regeneration, and Aggressive Kingpin. Again, absolutely nothing special there. However, next pleasant surprise comes from Massacre, who is immune and has poison on him. And again, when you go through the list of mutants, yes, there are some poison immune mutants, but they might not necessarily be the ones that you want to bring in. However, you have to. There is a poison immunity that you have to deal with, and keep that in mind. Outside of that, the fight itself isn't the hardest. It's relatively straightforward. Just have a poison immune mutant. But if worst comes to worst and push comes to shove, remember the same trick I told about Nebula fight, where if you cannot fit a poison immune champion on your team, then just make sure you start the fight with 100% health and maxed out willpower. By the time this poison expires, you will have a slither of health left if you haven't taken any chip damage due to willpower healing you up for first 60 seconds. So there is a workaround over that. However, nobody likes to lose majority of their health just because they started the fight. So ideally you want that poison immunity. Now Thor as Buffet and a whole bunch of Thor-alike nodes, but he's Noodle, so basically just make sure you know how to switch off his power gain. Ideally be 100% aware of how many hits you have on each of your special attacks of whichever champion you're using. And somebody that doesn't trigger buffs or has a heal block, for instance Archangel here, would more than likely be pretty much a perfect option. And the last nightmare, and this guy is a biznatch. This guy is a real big biznatch. So he has Limber, he has 200% power gain, he's immune to bleed, and he has Vigor. And this is another reason why I suggested bringing in a Mystic champion, because you can use, for instance, Dr. Doom's power control to dominate this fight. You can nullify the Vigors, feed your Mystic Dispersion through that, remain aggressive, and you will not have to worry as much about the Energize if you put him in a Doom cycle, for example. So there we go. Or even Magic, I think, could be potentially a decent option for Mordo and this fight, maybe. But yeah, this fight is going to be hard, it's going to be annoying, and you better be ready for it, or you're going to be eating a ton of block damage. Right, so every single path is covered now, only the boss is left. Right, and this is probably the most hated Mordo in the game. Now, his own actual nodes on the paper don't even look as bad. Now, he has strength in numbers, -1, it's kind of funny, because they have the potency of it, and now you ideally still want your entire team alive, so you will still probably revive before you start, but Kabam pretends that they did something for us and have the effectiveness of this node. That means that your abilities are only half as likely to fail per KO champion. Anyways, you still want your team to be full, because if your parry fails or if your ability fails and stun doesn't trigger, it's quite likely that you're going to be dead. The only difference now is that if you have dealt a significant amount of damage to this Mordo, you can potentially get away with having a champion or two KO'd before you finish the guy off. But it's still a toll, and this fight overall still sucks. So this is a Mordo with increased buff duration, with Spite, and then he has Do Not Go Gentle, which you 100% must ignore in this fight. The whole game plan typically involves ignoring Do Not Go Gentle, dying because of it at the end of the fight, bringing in whatever champion to do 1 HP of damage, and moving on. Anyways, right, so he has linked nodes active on him based on whatever path remain untaken. Most of the time you're going to have to also deal with Special Delivery and Hurt Locker, which makes this fight very, very annoying overall. Now, there are quite few decent counters at this time. Some of the newer additions that countered this fight perfectly have been Red Guardian. Red Guardian can never trigger Spite and has slow, therefore he works extremely well against Mordo. Dr. Doom can absolutely rock this fight. Ghost plus Hood synergy, tanking level 3s can blitz through this fight extremely quickly. Then we have champions like She-Hulk, Symbiote Supreme, Spider-Gwen and Wasp, surprisingly, is one of the best options here. And Void is also quite excellent. So those are some of the best options here. And just like with the rest of the video, I am not in any way, shape or form trying to imply that I have some sort of ultimate authority. I might have made a mistake here or there, or I might have missed out some things, in which case you are more than welcome to go to comment section and hopefully present yourself in a very well presented manner and help out other people who are struggling with this quest, because this quest is an absolute nightmare. Alright guys, now I'm not gonna lie to you, this video took a lot longer than I thought it would, but it just shows exactly why it was so needed, because the quest in itself is awful. So as I said before, I do understand that the video is very long and you can't rewatch this video on loop 15 times, and I'm not hoping that somebody will. Therefore, here once more is the full-on final text with kind of like the list of main problem fights to look out for on every single path. Might have missed something, hope I didn't, but if I did, drop it in comment section. Hopefully the comment section is also extremely helpful to summoners who are currently struggling with this quest, because I think I do personally agree that this is the most outrageous, most difficult, most annoying, most hated, hardest, call it how you will. This quest is a problem. Whatever Kabam thinks they changed in it or quote-unquote nerfed it, clearly was a drop in an ocean, and the quest still remains completely awful with very few legitimate counters available. And then the fact that every other fight needs a specific counter makes it impossible to build a team, and let alone the fact that there are 5-star class gates and people are moving away from 5 stars already. So it is what it is, but at the very least, I do hope that even if it's a revive that you save because of this video, or a couple of health potions, or maybe an energy refill, I do hope that it was worth watching it, and I do hope that it was worth making this video. If you did like it, then please do me a favor, hit that like button, hit that sub button, hit all the good buttons, and I will catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about